Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. Very excited to welcome Cody Dericks from Next Best Picture to the podcast today to talk about Sometimes a Great Notion, directed by and starring Paul Newman, released 50 years ago in December of 1971. How are we doing, Cody?
We're doing pretty good. Yeah, we're doing great talking 50-year-old films. And I know you brought me on because, I'm in my 50s. So I appreciate that.
I was like, who could I talk to about a 50-year-old movie about loggers? And I said, Cody is the guy.
That's me. Deforestation, baby. Chop it down.
Well, I mean, this is a film I was kind of going back and forth on. The fact that it got 2 Oscar nominations kind of pushed it to the forefront.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, I'd never heard of this one before. Most of the fall releases of 71 I've at least heard of, if not seen. This one was on the cusp, but because it got a Best Supporting Actor nomination, I'm like, okay, came out in December. And Paul Newman, obviously we all know him as a very fantastic actor. We don't really think of him as a director, but he actually directed a few films. And this might be the most famous. I don't know. Like, he directed a few things. Rachel.
Yeah, I was going to say Rachel did get a Best Picture nomination. So
yeah, so Rachel may be a little bit higher up than this. But what a cast in this one. It's not just Paul Newman. We also have Lee Remick and Henry Fonda. And our Best Supporting Actor nominee, Richard Jackal. Is it Jackal? I wanted to. I forgot to look up how to say it. We're gonna go with Jackal. That's how it's spelled. His one and only Oscar nomination. Before we get to our movie today, Cody, I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about like what role has film played in your life, and if you have a few favorites, I'd love for you to share them with our listeners.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sure like most film buffs, they would say I've been watching movies since I was little. And like, it's true. I have been, and, it started with Julie Andrews in Sound of Music and Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins. And then by the time I was 7, my favorite movie was Strangers on a Train.
Oh my gosh, we just did an episode on that for its 70th anniversary. I love that movie. You still like that movie?
Most 7-year-olds don't. Yeah. Oh yeah, I love it. It's I was the coolest kid on the playground.
Take me through. But
ever since then, I've just
take me through real quick. Take me through how you came to see Strangers on a Train that young. Like, how did that happen?
Mom is a very big Hitchcock fan. So she instilled in us a very, artistic upbringing. It was always classical music on the radio, and I grew up in Jersey, so we would see a lot of Broadway shows and watch a lot of Hitchcock movies. Like I said, I was a very popular child. And I ever since then I've just been kind of really into movies of all shapes and sizes, especially through the lens of the Oscars, which I've been obsessively following since I was 12, I want to say. The first Oscars I watched was the Brokeback Mountain Crash year, which, I mean, if any year is going to get you hooked on what the Oscars can do, I feel like that's the best intro.
That was insane. I remember watching that with a big group of people, and it was a time. I remember thinking like, Brokeback Mountain has won everything. Like that's sometimes scary when it comes to Best Picture with the Oscars, as it happened, that year.
Yep. I mean, the same thing happened, not in the exact same way, but with La La Land a few years ago, where it was the presumed front runner until the very, very last minute.
Roma.
Oh,
it happens.
Yes. Please don't remind me of that year.
We won't go into 2018.
Oh boy.
Julia opening the envelope, and you just went, no.
Well, actually, funny story. I was hosting an Oscar party that night, and my cable or internet, however I was siphoning away onto the Oscars without, a DirecTV login, cut out right at the envelope opening. So for a few minutes, I didn't know who won Best Picture until my mom texted me from across the country. But I still have yet to see Green Book win Best Picture. So in my head, it's not happened yet. So
so in your head, Julia opened the envelope and she said, no winner this year.
And she said, yeah, just a flock of bees just flew out of her mouth, and then the broadcast cut out. It's a happier ending than what we got.
She just talked about her own films and said, you know what, if it's been a while, give Notting Hill another look. And then she walked off
Have we talked about Eat, Pray, Love lately, Academy?
So yeah, Eat, Pray, Love. I thought I would be nominated for that. Nobody talks about it anymore. So what's going on?
What's going on with that?
Yeah, so Strangers on a Train, a favorite. So are you still a big Hitchcock fan? Like you like a lot of his films?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I work at an art house theater here in Chicago, and
cool.
we did a staff / employee picks series, and I picked Strangers on a Train because I wanted to see it on the big screen, and I got to
cool
it with my story about loving it as a 7-year-old.
So this is kind of cheesy, but when I was in high school, we had a Reno Film Festival, and one of the guests in 2001 was Pat Hitchcock O'Connell.
Oh, yeah.
And because I was like the A&E editor of my high school paper, I got invited to like the party of where all the quote unquote like celebrities were hanging. Like the big one was Tony Curtis was there for Some Make It Hot. It was like a classic film festival. And I got a chance to talk to Pat Hitchcock for like 5 minutes. Like I like sat down with her and talked to her about Strangers on a Train, about her father, about working with him, and it was a thrill. It's been 20 years. It was 20 years ago. It was November of 2001, and I always cherish that memory. We just lost her a few months ago. I think she was like 92 or 93. She is phenomenal in that film and Strangers on a Train. I always really liked her performance.
Yeah, she's a real memorable part of the movie for sure.
What are some other favorite films that you have?
Oh boy, well, my favorite of all time is West Side Story, which that's a lot about me, I think.
That's funny. We're so this is airing in mid-November, and right around the same week, I'm dropping an episode on West Side Story for its 60th anniversary.
60th.
Yeah.
Well timed.
It came out in the fall of 61.
I mean, with the remake coming up, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So as a huge fan of the original, what are your thoughts on Spielberg redoing it?
Well, I don't hold many things in this world sacred, so I'm not too sad about it. But especially because it's a chance to. I mean, I think it's a nearly flawless film, the original. But of course, one of the most glaring things about it is the casting and the whitewashing of the Puerto Rican characters. So the fact that this movie is gonna rectify that in a way, I think is an exciting reason, along with the Tony Kushner screenplay.
Tony Kushner,
that.
Yep.
Not so sure about basically everything else about it, but I'll go in with an open mind. I will, I'll watch it. The trailer came on the other day before I saw Dear Evan Hansen, and I turned to my boyfriend and I said, the thing about West Side Story is it has really good music, so if nothing else, it's gonna sound great.
Yeah, if you're sitting there in misery, at least you'll recognize and enjoy the songs.
Right, you can close your eyes, it'll be fine.
Yeah, no, I just rewatched. I hadn't seen it in many years. I rewatched West Side Story just a few nights ago and really enjoyed it. And it's funny. It's not a brief movie. It's like 2.5 hours. I'm curious.
It's not.
I was trying to find out how long the new one is. Is it going to be tighter, or is it going to be around the same length?
I'd imagine it'd probably be. Most musicals clock in around 2.5 hours, especially because that's usually the length of the stage version of the property. Right. 1.5 hours act 1, hour long act 2. It just kind of flows with the way you make musicals.
You don't see Spielberg having it run a scant 82 minutes long.
A tight 75. Yeah. No, I don't think so.
He might pull a duel from 50 years ago.
Oh, yeah. No, and any movie like that's probably gonna run a little long, which I'm generally fine with if it's worth the time. I'm not one of those people who's like 90 minutes or I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see, West Side Story, Strangers on a Train, anything else? Anything maybe like in the last 20-30 years that you really like?
Yeah. I have things I liked since I came out, since I've been alive. I promise. No. Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge horror fan, and probably my favorite singular genre of film is horror, and I'm
me too.
Lucky enough to say I was born the year that the only horror film won Best Picture, Silence of the Lambs, and that's one of my favorite movies. That's probably, I would say, close to a perfect movie. I mean, I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, but it's
How dare you?
Definitely up there. Yeah. Yeah. Hot take. This good movie is good. Crazy me.
Like, you guys want to hear it? Something crazy. I think Sounds of the Lambs is really great.
Yeah. Okay. Put down the pitchforks.
What?
Please.
Yeah, we did a 30th anniversary talk about that one last February. It came out Valentine's Day, 1991.
Of course it did. Why wouldn't it?
Why not?
What other time do you open a movie about a cannibalistic serial killer?
Yeah, that was a good time for horror at the Oscars. Like, the same season, like, Sounds of the Lambs opened, and then Kathy Bates won Best Actress for Misery.
Yeah, within like 2 months of each other.
Like,
well, and then that shows you how powerful Sounds of the Lambs was. That
right?
It lasted like 14 months to the Academy Awards. That's you never see that anymore.
It pulled
That's so rare.
It pulled kind of like a Get Out, which opened also in February of 2017. It didn't win Best Picture, but it won Best Original Screenplay. And you know, mostly, like, we're trained, like, if it opens between January and April, like, nothing happens with it at the Oscars.
Right.
So when it does, it's like really exciting. Right?
Yeah, it shows that the Academy members actually dared to think for themselves outside the box. That's doesn't sound like them, but
yeah,
I guess sometimes
but they, you know, like, it could transcend back in the early 90s. Now it's like, if you're in a horror film, no matter how good you are, I've talked about it many times on the podcast. The listeners are probably sick of me, but I'm just like, how did Toni Collette not be nominated for Hereditary?
Like, you got the right guy here to talk about that all day. Don't worry.
All right. So just real quick, why did she not? Was it because the film I think came out in June, right? Came out in June of 2018.
It was definitely a summer release. I don't remember exactly when. Yeah.
It wasn't like, I don't know if it was like on every top 10 or anything at the end of 2018. But I just don't know how you give a performance that insanely good and it only shows up at the Critics' Choice Award.
I mean, it's just a genre bias. It's as simple as that. Because that year was pretty strong for Best Actress. I'm not too sad about it. The 5 nominees were all pretty good. But I mean, that performance speaks for itself. So I think the fact that a lot of people probably weren't watching in the Academy because its subject matter is a little bit tricky, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end, she's like sawing off her own head. So I think maybe some Academy members were just like,
let's just nominate Glenn instead. Yeah,
let's nominate Glenn for the 18th time. Mm-hmm. And no, goes to someone else. Do you think Glenn Close will ever win?
Yeah, I genuinely do. I think she'll win eventually. I just don't think there's been an urgency to have it happen lately because the movies she's been in are bad.
Yeah, like, no, really, I mean, I like The Wife more than many others did, but it only got that one nomination, and that's where I went, that's
the other thing, is they're not across the board players. They should have just given it to her for Dangerous Liaisons in '88 and just
called it good.
Been done with it, especially because that year Jodie Foster wins, and then she wins again 3 years later for Sounds of the Lambs. Yeah. So looking back, it's like, you know. And I guess that'd be a waste of my time machine visit, but that might be what I do.
Yeah. Speaking of West Side Story and redoing it, so my favorite film of all time is Sunset Boulevard from 1950. That I think is like a flawless movie. I absolutely love it. And there's been talk for years that Glenn Close might do like the musical version on film. They were talking about it around the time of, you know, the nomination for The Wife, and I've heard nothing about it in 2 years. So I'm thinking that's not happening.
Yeah, it's one of those things she brings up every now and then. I think if that happens, that could be her Oscar, just because it's kind of like, okay, enough, fine, here you go.
Yeah, just a whole long season where it's just here, fine, take it. take the Oscar, everything.
There's been worse overdue Oscars, and it would be a lot of a performance, you know, knowing what I know about the musical. So yeah, like the way Renee Zellweger with Judy, which was a great performance, but she just like skated through. I don't think there anything she didn't win. Like, she just won everything. No, it kind of was just happening, and we all were kind of like, okay, I guess she's getting another Oscar.
She was retired for a while. Now she's back.
Yeah.
Didn't she say like at one of the shows, like, "Hi everybody, I'm back," or something like that?
I hope she goes away for another 10 years and then comes back for another Oscar.
Yeah. Pulls like a Daniel Day-Lewis, just like comes back every 5 to 10 years and wins another one.
Don't mind if I do.
So last thing I want to ask you before we get to our film today is, so you write and podcast for Next Best Picture. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
I do, yes. Next Best Picture, I've been writing and podcasting there for just about 3 years now.
Very
We
cool.
cover award season all year long. We focus most of our time, obviously, during the actual award season, but throughout the year, we still keep that in the back of our heads when we look at movies, and we review every major release. We do podcasts about them. We write about them. We write articles. They recently sent me to the Venice Film Festival, which was really fun.
Wow, very cool.
That was pretty cool. Got to go to Italy. Yes, I lost my bags along the way, but it's okay. I still got to see Dune, so it was worth it.
You got to see Dune. Are you allowed to say anything yet or no?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good movie.
I just tried to read the book. I'm not a big science fiction person, and I couldn't. I tried, and I'm just like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
See, I did read the book, and I did not like the book, so I wasn't too excited going to the movie. And so I think the fact that I even appreciated the movie, is kind of a mark of better. Yeah. Not to say my opinion is better than most people's, but it's a mark of higher praise than people who would like the book anyway.
So is there a lot of pressure when you're at like the Venice Film Festival to just be constantly like seeing everything you can and writing reviews and just like not taking a breath, sleeping for 4 hours?
To a degree, I got 4 hours was my average, actually, to be honest. I would not say pressure. I think it was more like everybody there is just excited to be seeing movies and be seeing great movies, especially before everybody else, not in an elitist way, but in kind of a we don't know what this is going to be way. So it's less pressure and more you get swept up in film festival fever, and you want to see everything. I wanted to see even more than I saw, which was a good amount. But yeah, I had a great time.
So how many films did you see total?
I only got to see 12, which is
only 12.
Yeah.
And how many days is it? 7?
5. I was there for 5 days.
Oh, you're 5. Okay.
Yeah, it's like an 11-day festival. I was only there for about 5 because traveling is expensive, especially to Europe. So
yeah.
I could only take 5 days. So I saw about 2 movies a day ish, which is plenty.
But that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great time.
I would love to. I haven't been to a film festival in a long time, and I'm like, okay, one of these seasons, Brian, we gotta go. I'll pay my way. I'll do it. Like, I'm really curious about Telluride. That's not very far from where I am. It's only a couple states over, so I'm thinking maybe going there next year. And I don't know how expensive it is, but I want to make it happen. Be fun.
Yeah, Venice was a little pricey, I will say that. Not to surprise you, but it was totally worth it, especially to be in Venice. Like, even outside of the films, it's the most beautiful city in the world, some might say.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm going to Italy in March just on my vacation from teaching.
Oh, amazing.
I'm really excited about it. Yeah, going with a few friends and my partner, and it's gonna be quite like, I don't even have like a day to just relax. It's like I finish teaching on a Friday, we get on the plane on Saturday, we come back on that Sunday, and then I start teaching on the Monday. It's like we're taking every day in March. It's gonna be crazy, but it'll be fun. So I'll probably finally make it to Venice. I haven't been to Venice before. Check it out.
Yeah, you gotta go before.
I don't know if I'll see any films before
yeah.
Sinks to the Sea. The festival I've been to a couple times is Sundance, and that one was always really fun because there's always just a great buzz, and you don't really know a whole lot about the films. Like, when you get there, it's kind of like everything's just like you're watching fresh. Like, there hasn't been a lot written about those films leading up to the festival, which is kind of exciting. Have you been to Sundance before?
I did Sundance this year for the first time.
Oh, cool.
But that means I did Sundance from my couch. So I didn't, leave my living room. So I got to watch movies in my PJs, which is fine. I'm totally okay with that.
Was any of Venice online, or was it all in person?
No, you got to be there.
Oh, interesting. So things are coming back. So you think Sundance in January will be all in person again?
I believe it's a mix this year.
Oh, it'll be a mix.
They're doing both. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is fine by me again. I would happily do either one, but the online version was very convenient. I'll say that.
Right. From your couch.
Yes. With snacks, a bathroom nearby. Pretty good.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, welcome. Thanks so much, again, for being here. And so let's get into our movie today.
Yeah.
Sometimes a Great Notion. So I have just a little synopsis for our listeners who might not know anything about this movie. Here's a little bit about what's going on here. So the economic stability of fictional Wakanda, Oregon, is threatened when
I know
Wakanda.
It's like, wait a minute.
Of all names,
what are they saying?
It's not related to Black Panther, I promise. It's threatened when the local logging union calls a strike against a large lumber conglomerate, when independent logger Hank Stamper, played by Paul Newman, his brother Joe, played by Richard Jekyll, and their father Henry, played by Henry Fonda, are urged to support the strikers. They refuse, and the townspeople consider them traitors. Hank struggles to keep the small family business alive as Leland, Henry's youngest son and Hank's half-brother, played by a very handsome Michael Sarrazin, returns home. Despite the fact that he is uncomfortable living with a family he barely knows, Lee joins forces with them when they are forced to battle both the locals and the elements. After aiding their adversaries when their lives are in peril, the Stampers are handed two calamities at once that change their lives forever. That's a little bit of the story. You have anything you wanted to add to that? Anything I left out that you think is important for the listener?
I mean, that's kind of it. There's really not much plot. It's more, let's follow this family around as they chop down trees and have discussions about it.
Yeah, this one doesn't follow like the narrative plot chart as well as some other films. It's just
no, I mean, you can tell it's based on a novel in the way that it kind of is more about the characters and setting up the world and traveling through their lives rather than being like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Yeah, based on the novel by Ken Kesey, Kesey. He also wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the novel, very famously.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
which came out, I don't know when the book came out, but that film is just 4 years after this in 1975. The screenplay was written by John Gay, Oscar nominee for the film Separate Tables. I believe that came out in the late 50s.
Yeah, that's David Niven's Oscar.
David Niven, okay. Did you know that Paul Newman was not originally supposed to direct this movie? Did you know that?
I didn't. Was he going to be like the star, but not the director?
Yeah, so he signed on to be the lead actor. The director chosen was named Richard A. Colla. He was signed to direct the film in 1970. They shot the film for 5 weeks, and then he left the project due to artistic differences over photographic concept, and he also required a throat operation. So he was like in ill health of some kind. So the movie shut down for a few weeks. Around the same time, Paul Newman broke his ankle. So it wasn't a great start to this production. But at a certain point, Newman, the movie was like about to die. Like the director wasn't coming back, and so they were trying to figure out what to do. Newman considered George Roy Hill, his director on Butch Cassidy, right? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He declined, so Newman said, "I'll just direct it myself." So I don't know how much of the film is shot by the original director. If they shot for 5 weeks, I'm assuming there's some scenes in this movie.
That's a good chunk of time, I would assume, unless they said, you know what, we're just going to start over.
Unless they just threw it out.
Right. Because I don't know if if the original director gets any sort of credits.
No, isn't the rule like when it comes to directing, like isn't the rule if there's like a director who leaves and then someone else comes in? I thought the rule was it has to be 51%, like one director. Isn't that the rule? That sounds
right. That sounds like some union.
I always think about Superman 2. Richard Donner shot. Didn't he shoot the whole movie?
He shot his own version, I believe, and then somebody else came in.
And then Richard Lester, I believe his name was, came in and shot new scenes. And I thought I read that when the Richard Donner cut came out in 2006, it was able to say directed by Richard Donner because more than 51% of the movie was directed by him, or something weird like that.
That makes sense.
So I'm assuming Paul Newman shot at least half of the movie. Sure,
that makes sense. Yeah, and I love that he was able to just kind of say, you know what, I'll do it myself. Don't mind if I do.
Yeah, I mean he's a pretty big star at this point, right? This is after Butch Cassidy. This is after Cool Hand Luke.
After the Hustler.
I mean he is pretty big by Hustler. 1961, so this is 10 years after that. So
he's an established star by now.
But I'm like, how many times has that happened? I'm curious in the long history of film, like how many times has a film started and then the director bowed out for whatever reason, and then the star of the movie, who's a very well-known actor, says, I'll just direct the rest.
Well, and the funny thing is, I'm looking now at his director's credits. He made about like half a dozen movies across his lifetime, and only one other movie has him in it, and it came out after this one. So I think he was a little bit, I don't know if he was reluctant to direct himself, but it's not something that he did a lot.
Yeah, because he is not in Rachel, right?
He's not in Rachel. He's not in Glass Menagerie. No, he's not in any of them.
Yeah, I think Rachel, that was a film that he like from day one, like this is my directorial debut. And then I think this film, it was like, oh, I don't want the movie to fall apart, so I'll just keep.
Yeah,
but I wonder, I wonder if he had not directed Rachel, if he had never directed before, I don't know if he would have taken this on. I mean, maybe, but
that would be really
that'd be kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like if you've never directed a day in your life.
Yeah. And I mean, all this struggle, this behind the scenes struggle is totally worth it because the movie is totally okay. It's a fine, I think it's a fine movie.
Yeah. We will give our opinions on it in just a moment. I have a couple other things. So the film, so Wakanda is not a real city in Oregon, but they
it's not a real city in Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. But they did really shoot the film in Oregon. I guess apart from maybe like a scene or two that they shot in California, like most of this was shot in Oregon. So that's cool. I love the outdoor photography, like all of the location stuff looks really cool. And then the movie got 2 Oscar nominations, one for Richard Jekyll for Best Supporting Actor. Do you know what the other nomination was for?
Best Song, I believe. That's stirring.
Like the music in this movie, as I'll get into, I was not a fan of the music in this. It was like, it was questionable.
Not my thing.
So we talked about a film called Koch recently with Walter Matthau, directed by Jack Lemmon, his only movie that Jack Lemmon directed. And that film got like nominated for like sound and for music, and it was like terrible. And I'm like, why is this even nominated, let alone in the conversation?
They had some weird stuff going on in the 70s in general, but specifically at the Oscars. So, and I know that this year is the year of Shaft, obviously, which clearly won Best Song. So
so the song in Sometimes a Great Notion was called All His Children, and it lost to Isaac Hayes. Theme from Shaft, which is just like such an iconic, amazing song from the 1971 film. I'm glad that if that had beat Shaft, that would have been not good.
No, and I wonder if it's a case of like, well, Shaft's gonna win, so we can nominate just not great stuff.
But this was not. This was an end of the year release. This came out at the end of December of 71, and I think it was a case where like it opened in like just a few cities, like maybe even just LA, New York. Because if you look on IMDb, it shows like USA. The next date it shows like March of 72.
Oh yeah, they did a platform release.
It's like they just released it just a little bit at the end of December just to qualify. And then in March is when it went wide. So in some ways, this is almost like a 72 release, but it did come out just briefly at the end of the year.
Just in time for Christmas.
So there must have been kind of disappointment when it only got the 2 nominations, right? Probably thought like, well, maybe we'll get, actor for Newman, supporting actor for Fonda, and maybe
adapted
picture or something, right? So,
it makes you wonder because his last movie was a hit at the Oscar. Paul Newman.
Rachel
was a Oscar success. It was nominated for Best Picture, so I'm sure by comparison, at least, this was a disappointment.
Yeah, but he probably was just happy to finish the film. I feel like that would be my victory. Would be like, oh, we did it. Like we
exactly,
because it sounds like they started shooting in May of 1970. So why did it take so long for it to come out?
You gotta wait for the trees to grow before you chop them down.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there was that waiting period in the middle there, like between production times, but like there's a lot of films I've talked about on the podcast where like they're shooting it in like spring of 71 and then it's out in July. Some of these movies are out really fast. That was not the case here. So the last thing about the movie for trivia, did you know this was the very first movie to be broadcast on HBO?
Oh.
Did you know that HBO went live on November 8th, 1972?
That is
I thought HBO
earlier
was
than I thought.
Yeah, I thought HBO was like early 80s.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't here for it, so I couldn't tell you. But I
wasn't either.
Got that in real quick there.
Yeah. But so I'm obviously I grew up on HBO and everything. I don't know why I thought HBO started in like the early 80s.
Well, I feel like it didn't really hit prolific levels prestige until, you know, the 90s or so, at least in terms of their programming.
Yeah, so it says here that the pay television network launched in Pennsylvania in November of 72. So it probably didn't grow really, at least for a few years. I can't imagine every household had HBO subscription in like 75.
Like, well, and strange, this was their big grand opening, was just a little movie. Not like Lawrence of Arabia or something.
Yeah, not like Turner Classic Movies launched with Gone with the Wind. You think HBO would have launched with something like big classic film, but they start with this one. Like, must have been cheap. Must have been very cheap for them to buy it. I don't know. When the movie finally aired on commercial television in 1977, the film was retitled Never Give a Inch, a reference to the Stamper family philosophy. And that is a inch, not an inch.
They retitled it?
They retitled it, and it's grammatically like incorrect too. So like, why even bother?
A inch.
Never.
No, I actually do remember. I remember seeing in the movie there was like a plaque or something on their.
Did it
fireplace.
Say inch?
It said sometimes inch, because it made me go.
But so they said, you know what's really gonna get people to flock to their television sets if we call it Never Give a Inch. That's what'll get them there.
Right. Sometimes A Great Notion is out. So
sometimes year. I mean, both titles are pretty awkward. I mean, sometimes A Great Notion, I've been like most of the day I've just been like repeating it in my mind just so that I don't forget it.
Right. Well, it's strange to title your movie with the beginning of the first word is a kind of an unsure word. It's like
maybe sometimes
occasionally.
That would have been better title.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not even quite sure what the title refers to.
Yeah, but I think okay. maybe sometimes occasionally. I think I would have liked that better.
Yeah, every now and then you give an inch.
Yeah. All right, so that takes us to our opinions on this film. So yeah, what did you think? First off, are there a lot of films from this time period that you've seen, like 70, 71, 72? Like, is this a time period of film that you've been seeing a lot of stuff?
I'm fairly familiar with this time, mostly in relation again to the Oscars. But yeah. I mean, it's not. This is not a new opinion, but the 70s is a pretty good time for film. Maybe arguably the best decade for film. So I've seen a lot of the big hitters from this time. You know, obviously like The Godfather, of course, The Sting, things like that. But you've tried to cover. I've seen the movie The Godfather. Yes,
that's coming up soon, film. And I'm very intimidated. I'm like, what the hell do I do about The Godfather? All right, no let me give a plot summary.
Like, yeah, okay. Well, I know, you know, everybody knows sometimes A Great Notion. So following it up with this little movie, The Godfather. Good luck.
Yeah. March. Yeah, it's crazy. Early 72, Cabaret is February of 72, and The Godfather is March of 72. Like, I don't even get a breather in the spring. I'm like, oh my God, we're going right into like two huge films. But so The Godfather, obviously very famous film of the early 70s, and 71. I mean, like the big ones are like The French Connection, Last Picture Show.
Yeah. And the thing about 71 is I'm looking at my list. I have lists of because I'm a normal sane person. I have a list of every single year, the film releases that came out that year ranked in order of my preference. Saying that out loud.
I do the same thing. Yeah.
Sane and sensible. So, you know, and looking at my list for 71, it's not a super remarkable year.
It's not.
Yeah, like you said, French Connection, Fiddler on the Roof is pretty good. I love the Elaine
that episode would have aired by now. I haven't watched it yet. I'm a little nervous by the 3-hour running time.
She's a long one, you know. Like I said, musicals, they take the time. But that one's one of the best musicals ever.
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, my favorite film from 71. That movie is in and out in an hour and 40.
Oh yeah. Delectable.
Don't need 3 hours for that one. But
yeah, and then there's some
So there's like the pacing of these films. I mean, almost 100% of them, they're paced much slower than anything we see now. So that's been something I've had to kind of like, you know, of get used to. Especially
specifically I was just about to say, specifically in this movie, there's extensive scenes of just people logging,
trees falling. If trees falling is your thing. If it's like your ASMR,
have I got a movie for you?
If you just like watching trees fall, there's a segment in this. I wrote in my notes. I'm like, how many trees have to fall, Paul?
Right. It's
We
like
got
that. Yeah, it's that saying: if a tree falls in the forest and Paul Newman's not there to film it.
There is one cool shot where like we see Paul Newman in the same shot that he like chops a tree, and we see the camera like follow the tree falling. I'm like,
Yeah.
he's in the shot. That's cool.
That's
It's not just
cool.
like, it's not just an extra from, you know, a wide angle.
Right. It's not some actual person who chops down trees. I don't even know the name for that logger. I live in a big city. I don't know these things.
Yeah. So what did you think of this one overall?
I thought it was good. Overall, I was throughout it was, I would say, it's sometimes a good notion. The whole time I was kind of enjoying it, but not really seeing the purpose for the film in a way for most of the runtime. And then I'd say the last 15, 20 minutes or so really kind of tied all together and made me go, oh, okay, now I see what we're doing. And I really appreciated that part of the movie. I think everything from, if this is a spoiler, I guess, then don't listen.
It's everything, 50 years, we're good.
That's true. That's a long time, half a century, in fact. Yeah, it's everything from the accidents, the double accident scene on, I think is pretty effective. And that made me appreciate the movie on the whole. But up till that point, I kind of was riding along its wavelength, but not really super enjoying it. But that after that moment, I kind of clicked into the movie a little more.
Something that's kind of hard. I don't read up on these films. Like I don't like read the synopsis or anything. So I don't really know what to expect. And like halfway through this movie, I'm like, is this gonna go somewhere? And I just felt like something is going to happen that's very, very bad. like somebody's gonna get hurt. Like there's so many scenes of them working. I'm like, okay, something's gonna happen. And we definitely, and not just that pays off.
And there's not just extended scenes of them working. There's extended scenes of other things in their lives. Like there's a long drawn out racing sequence, then a long drawn out touch football sequence.
That was a question for me too.
You're kind of just living with these people, which I don't think is a bad thing in the movie, but I kind of was struggling to find the points for a lot of it.
Yeah, this movie was a mixed bag for me in that I love movies where you just like hangout films where you just kind of sit and spend time with a family and their dynamics. And I mean, it's an interesting family. Like this half brother is coming back. They haven't seen him in a long time. Yeah, I thought Henry Fonda was really great in this. Like he plays this overbearing, sometimes really awful father figure, like to a T. Like he's really good. Like this is just after Once Upon a Time in the West, a couple years after that. So he's now playing a little bit against type, kind of an asshole.
Yeah, well, and
fun to watch.
I think his characterization is kind of the key to the whole movie, because what I most picked up on and appreciated was, and I don't even know if the movie, because of the way it ends, is totally on board with this as an idea, but I kind of liked its examination of like masculinity and like hereditary masculinity, passing it down from father to son to child to grandson, and how it can really damage an entire family in one bad day, as it does in this movie. Like I said, I don't think the ending kind of ties that all together, or kind of reverts back to its original ideas of the family in a way. But the Henry characterization really epitomizes, I think, what the movie's going for, because the whole time he's, like you said, he's kind of just mean to his family, in a loving way.
While he's in a cast, it looks ridiculous, and he's like the masculine. it's like you look ridiculous, dude. Sit down.
Yeah. Well, I also appreciate the fact that his name was Henry, because I sometimes struggle with character names. So Henry's playing Henry. Got it. I can remember that.
Yeah, that one I could okay, got his name.
Yeah,
I always think that's smart. Like weird for it'd be weird to be an actor and your character name is your name. I'd just be like, okay.
Yeah, that's I think there was another one in the movie too. I think
it's based on a novel, so I don't. It's based on a novel. I don't think they would have changed it. So
exactly.
I mean, I don't think that's why Henry Fonda was cast in the movie, but I'm sure that
unless the novel was like he's a Henry Fonda type.
Henry Fonda type. Yeah, so my thing with this movie is, and I think Quentin Tarantino touched on it. I read a little thing where he was kind of mixed on the movie too, but he mentions this scene. This movie has one of the best, most harrowing scenes of any movie I've seen.
Yes,
this whole year.
Completely agree.
It's so good that everything around it just kind of suffers a bit for me. Like That scene of Hank trying to save his brother Joe Bob from drowning, it's like 5 minutes, maybe longer. Like, and it is harrowing. I mean, the way it's played, the lack of music, they're laughing, and it's like, really, like, this is happening, like, this is how I'm gonna die, really, like, they're almost laughing about it. And it's the way it plays out for a long time. As the viewer, you're like, he's gonna be fine, like, it's gonna be fine. And just that, like, we can all, if you have a brother or sister, you put yourself in that position immediately. You're like, oh my God, if this was like someone I loved, and there's nobody around. This is 71, so they don't have cell phones. There's no one to call for help. And like the slow realization with Hank, like, there's nothing I can do. Like, I'm literally gonna have to go, like, put my head in the water and blow air into his lungs until I can't anymore. It's like, it is an incredible work of, like, that's filmmaking. I love that scene.
It's by far the best scene in the film, by far. To the point where, like you said, it's almost kind of makes you wonder why the rest of the movie wasn't that good. But I think it's kind of to a point almost. It's like you said, it's so casual, and I mean that's how it happens in real life. I gotta assume these types of accidents, you don't think like, oh, this is the end of this person's life, he's no longer going to be alive at the end of this moment. But that's what it's like. And I mean, throughout the whole movie, I kind of was surprised knowing that Richard Jackal got a nomination at the Oscars for this performance. I kind of was, he was a nice character, but I kind of wasn't really sure what made that nomination come about. And then that scene happens, and you're like, okay, well, now I understand why the Oscars noticed it, because it's, like you said, by far the most notable scene in the movie.
I wrote that down too about halfway through. I'm like, why wasn't Henry Fonda nominated? He's clearly the showiest part in this. And he had not won. He would not win until on Golden Pond 10 years later. I'm like, why would they nominate this other guy? He's barely even in the movie. I'm like, what? And then we got to that. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's the case of not necessarily like he gave one of the 5 best performances of the year. He was an actor who happened to be in just this incredible scene of tension that, through his talent and through his acting, really just, it came through in a way that I don't think any actor at the time could have done. Like, the way it's played with him and Newman is just so, like, perfectly done, like, well drawn, and just really, really, terrifying.
It's it's really quietly horrifying, and you think it's over, but no, he's still there. There's a little bit more time left. There's some hope. And I think the humor of the character and the positivity and the way he's like laughing through the whole thing almost, which, like, knowing the way that I handle dire situations is probably how I'm gonna go. So it was an eerie vision of the future.
And when we first find him there, he's just like, oh, I'm fine. Oh yeah, go take care of Dad. I'm fine. I gotta wait for the water to rise up, and I'll push. I'm just stuck right here, but I'm not hurt. I'm okay. That's what he tells Lee.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. Because you as an audience member know this, because this is a movie, you're probably not going to make it out of this, but the way he's playing it makes you want him to so badly.
Yeah. And like, it looks, the way that Newman shot it, I'm assuming Newman shot that scene, directed that scene, but the way it looks so real, it generally looks like he is stuck. And I'm like, how did they shoot this? Like, it just looks very real.
And it clearly isn't in a studio or a set.
This is not like,
unless it is, and it's really well. Unless it is, and it's just some movie magic I couldn't pick up on. Who knows?
But just, boy, once he actually goes under the water, I'm just, oh my God, this is not happening. This is like, because I mean, that there's no way they can get this log off of him. This thing is huge.
That scene really was the reason for the movie, I think. And it made the whole movie better.
Like 6 months from now, when I think of this movie, I'm going to think of that scene, and pretty much everything else is going to be kind of cloudy.
Oh, absolutely. Except for the song. That catchy song
is great. Yeah.
How could you forget?
And maybe Henry Fonda's performance. There were some moments with him. His final scene, when after he's been injured too, that's a scary moment. He gets like, his arm gets like hit by the side of that tree. So like, that scene is set up in a really good way. Like, they're just going about their day and everything's going fine, but like the tree that Hank is cutting down, right? It like splits into different parts, right? And it goes in all different ways, and it happens very quickly, and they can't really get away. Like, the way that was shot, and I thought that was done really well.
Yeah, and that's kind of the opposite type of accident that the brother goes through, where it just happens so suddenly, and it's, oh, this is an emergency right now. We need to take care of this right now.
And there's kind of a setup for it early on. Like they let go of like a log and it tumbles down a hillside and they all duck and nobody gets hurt. And you're like, that's when I went, okay, someone's going to get hurt. We do not spend this long of time with them on the job if nothing is going to happen. I'm like, there's no movie.
Right.
If like something's got to happen here.
Then it's just like an industrial instructional film on logging.
Yeah. At one point I'm like, is this just like going to be a documentary? What's going on here? But yeah, I mean, another thing I was disappointed by in the movie were the female roles are very just like underwritten. Like Lee Remick, who's a great actress. I love her in The Omen and some projects around this time. And she doesn't get a whole lot to play. And I mean, the movie is almost 2 hours long, but it feels short at times. Like it feels like there were moments that were left on the cutting room floor, or like her reason for leaving at the end, it happens very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm like,
what? I didn't really know what was happening when it was happening. Where are you going, Lee?
Yeah. So there are character beats that I felt like were missing. Like even the scene that we just talked about that I think is so great, like there's not really a lot dealt with it like afterwards. Like there's not like a scene where I thought like the scene with Henry, like there was going to be like they don't really even talk about it. It's kind of just they move on to other things, and that felt weird.
Well, the Lee Remick character, I think she does a great job with what she has, but like you said, it's very underwritten. It's mostly just a lot of, and she's clearly there to be kind of the balance to these like men who are going to go do their job, and we don't care if we're, scabs or not. And she just gives mostly a lot of kind of glances. It's mostly a lot of just kind of looking at them like, you boys. She does have one monologue where she's talking with I believe it's the younger brother about the men and how they relate to her life, and that's a nice moment. But I think, like I said, the movie as a whole isn't really moving in a direction that pays off what her character is doing in a way. It felt mostly kind of wasted.
Did you pick up that she and Lee, the younger brother, were a thing? Were having something?
There was.
I read on IMDb that there was a sex scene between the two that was shot and later cut.
Oh yeah, I don't. Like, I would almost guarantee I would guarantee in the novel that's something that's explored with any insights. But I don't. There's something between them I kind of felt, but I wasn't like, well, obviously they're going to go run off together.
And then there's this really creepy subplot of like Paul Newman's character, Hank, when he was like 14, like he had like an affair with his stepmother.
Yeah, I think really I missed like one line. It's not
explored very much. And I'm like,
no,
why is this here?
It's kind of just tossed off, and it's like, no, that feels really important to your character and why they're just charging through life the way they are. Maybe we should talk about. No, we're not going to talk about it. Okay, never mind. Just move on.
Yeah. There's that nice moment outside when like they stop and talk about it, Lee and Hank, and it's like maybe a minute and a half. I'm like, no, you need to explore this movie. Like you don't just like throw that out there and then on to the next scene. Like what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, the character clearly had repressed it to a degree, which is realistic. And I think, the fact that he tosses it off so casually speaks to the way he's dealt with this trauma, I would say. But the movie doesn't really do anything with it.
Yeah. And I thought the opening and ending of the movie was kind of confused. Like it took me like 10 minutes to get into the groove of the movie. It opens with like not the main characters. It's like this other group. And they're looking across the way at the house of the characters that we come to know. The way it opens is very confusing. And for about 5 minutes, I was like, what is happening here? And then the ending of the movie is almost too goofy. Like the sight of the arm. I was like, what?
I did not like the ending. I didn't like the ending one bit.
Yeah, it just didn't. It didn't feel very satisfying. It was not like, oh, Henry Fonda in some ways came back to give these guys the middle finger. I'm like, that is out of a different movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was just weird. I'm like, who does that to their father?
Yeah, I can see that paying off more in a novel, kind of like,
maybe
where it's more about symbolism and blah blah blah. But seeing it played out literally in a movie is kind of icky. And the whole ending, I did not enjoy. In a way, it's satisfying to see these characters that you're supposed to have come to love triumph in a way, but the film doesn't really examine like the cost of getting there, and also the fact that, you know, the thing they're picking up and continuing doing, which is played like a victory, the fact that they're sticking with his logging, to me it reads as a tragedy. You know, the fact that all their family is torn apart, both like literally those who didn't make it and those who have left voluntarily, and they're still going through with this job. And I think there's something to be examined there about, you know, the stubbornness of men and how they will just, you know, power through anything even if it's not the right thing to do. But the movie doesn't seem interested in that. It kind of, you can get that by watching the actions, but the movie doesn't comment on it. Not that I need it to, but the ending kind of seems to revert in the opposite direction of where I would think it would be going.
Yeah, I like that idea. Like, I don't care that my father and my brother have died. Like, I'm going to finish this. Like, that's an interesting idea, but there's some, I don't know the way it's directed or put together in editing. There's just something lacking. I didn't feel satisfied at the end. I was like, okay. Like,
it just kind of read
more rewarding. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of was just kind of sad for them. The movie is kind of excited for them.
Like, you don't feel a lot of closeness between Lee and Hank at the end. I mean, they have a couple moments towards the end together, but I'm just like, so the wife left, and this is the only person now that you have in your life.
Right.
And I don't know. I'm just like,
And the Lee character was even an outsider who got dragged into this business, kind of. You know, he's coming back home.
Yeah, and he's been doing other stuff.
He's been doing other hippie stuff as they cannot stop pointing out his long hair. Oh, my
that's
God.
right. Yeah, Henry is not happy with his son's hair,
which I think is an interesting moment in history to time capsule, like to kind of you know put on film. Like, people were appalled that men were growing their hair long, and now it's like, okay. But back then, I'm, you know, watching members of the, you know, the Greatest Generation react to it. It was really interesting.
Yeah. And Henry kind of homophobic. Didn't he say something disparaging?
Oh, probably. But that's just, I figure when I watch movies from this era, I'm like, God. I'm probably gonna be offended. It's par for the course.
Yeah. In this era, most films, like, either there's, I mean, sometimes there's a gay character of quality, and that was even in film we talked about, Shaft. Shaft has a scene of a character,
right? The bartender,
and he's very proud of his sexuality. It's like a really great scene. I was on that episode, I talked about it a lot. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, in summer of 71, that's not something you would have seen very much.
Right. And I mean, this is a much longer discussion, but you really don't see movies be blatantly aggressively homophobic in the same way that you do in the like in the way that is shocking and takes you out of the movie until like the 80s. Until the Reagan era, which, you know, makes sense with everything that was going on sociopolitically at the time. But yeah, it's kind of just typical. I wasn't as a gay man myself, I wasn't appalled because it's just like, I figured Henry Fonda's character who cuts down trees for a living isn't a gay rights supporter.
Probably not. Yeah, that would have been a twist. Right. But let's see, anything. There were some other things I liked. There's a great scene where Newman he goes into that guy's office and saws the desk. I thought that was a good moment.
That was fun. It could have been something out of Animal House, but it was strange.
He's like, doesn't he, like, Newman says, like, I don't know what this was for, but I feel really good.
Right. And the other guy goes, this was my father's desk. So sad.
Yeah. And then there's the death of that guy. He's like saying something horrible about Hank, and then he like falls to his death.
Oh yeah.
And they hear it on the radio. I'm like, oh my God.
Right. And he said previously that he was gonna try to kill himself, make it look like an accident for the insurance, but then he did die in an accident. It was very that didn't really seem like that would have.
It didn't seem like that would have killed him though. He just like fell off a ladder, but I guess he hit the ground.
I think I saw some sparks fly and some electricity. That's scary to me. So
yeah. So what did we think? I mean, I don't know how much of this Newman directed, but like, what did we think of Newman as a director here? Anything he did interesting, like stylistically or with the cinematography? Anything that you thought was either good or bad?
It's not a very showy directorial job. There's not a ton going on with the filmmaking that is elevating the material. I think it kind of just presents the material as is, which is fine. You know, he's doing a serviceable job.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you know, given, like you said, the background of the film where he took over 5 weeks into production, and it sounded like it was a hard shoot. Probably didn't allow him many opportunities to be, you know, fancy pants with his camera. But I think he does a good job, especially with the I always think that people, when they talk about direction, don't give enough credit to the quality of performances. You know,
Right.
like a lot of performance quality relies on an actor's talent, obviously, but you do have to have a good director to match the tone of the movie and also the other actors in the film. That's a lot of directors' jobs. And I think the performances on an ensemble level are pretty well, like they're pretty harmonious in this movie. And I think that I do have to credit Newman with that.
And I think
generally find that when actors direct films, that the performances are what they do best at, rather than the actual filmmaking quality itself.
When an actor is behind the camera, usually, if nothing else, the acting in the film will be stellar. We'll have a good cast. It'll be, the actors will be well chosen. And I don't know if he didn't start the movie directing, so I don't know if he actually cast anybody in the movie. Like if they had been shooting for 5 weeks. Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
probably already
had
the cast.
Not.
But I mean, if nothing else, that scene of his brother's death of the drowning is done like it. That felt like it was directed by a master craftsman, like whoever.
Agreed.
However he came to do that, because that scene could have been so cheesy. It could have been overwrought. Could have been like loud music and exactly. and like it could have gone too emotional. Like the brother, like as he's going down, like just starts crying. Or it could have, but the way it's played more simply makes it scarier, and it's just like, oh my god. I like the little moment of the brother. Doesn't he like brush his hand over Hank's head?
He did, and he kind of runs his finger over his forehead in almost like a baptism. And the character is religious, so it makes a lot of sense.
And doesn't his death is caused by doesn't he laugh in the water? Isn't that what happens? Because he's trying to breathe into his mouth, but at one point he like releases something really big, and then he can't.
Paul Newman's like, stop laughing, but the character is so effervescent that it's just he goes down laughing.
Yeah, it's just an incredible scene, and a lot of credit has to be given to Newman for that. Not only as the actor in the scene, but for the director. Anything else you want to say about the performances? I think we've touched on. Again, I thought Fonda was really stellar in this. I'm kind of surprised he wasn't nominated along with Jackal.
Yeah, especially because as an old guard actor, they love to just toss nominations when you just show up to work. So the fact that he was actually doing a good job here makes it more surprising that he wasn't more considered by the Academy.
Yeah, having never won before, you think he would have been in the conversation if the film came out at the end of December. It's interesting that they decided on another actor from the movie, but that scene is so. It's like, okay, so maybe Henry Fonda should have been in that scene with the drown.
Well,
then maybe Fonda would have won. Yeah. if they had switched it, if the brother got the arm.
Yeah.
Fonda's there. Damn it, that could have been me.
I could have drowned.
I could have drowned. That would have been. I almost think that would have been too much. If it was like his own father, that would have been really tough.
That would have been, I think, nailing the point of the movie too hard if he had to literally watch the old guard drown.
Yeah. I think the fact that
way
his
of life
brother
slowly,
that was the way to go. Yeah. I'd be curious to read that scene in the novel. I wonder how the author writes the prose of that moment.
Right, because I can watch a lot of this movie going, oh, I'm sure this is much more interesting or makes a lot more sense in the novel, but that scene feels made for film.
Right. That felt very much like a cinematic moment, whereas some other parts of the film, like when they're eating breakfast, and boy, these people like to eat, man. That breakfast is pretty epic, right? There's like so much food. It's like Pleasantville style, man. There's like tons of food on that plate, and it's like still dark out. I'm like, you would have this. I never have that much of an appetite that early in the morning.
No, especially after I've been kicked out of bed by Henry Fonda. No, thank you.
Like Fonda, he's just like chowing down, man. He's a hungry guy. And I want to say, we haven't really talked about Michael Sarrazin, who plays Lee. I thought he was really good in this. Did you like him in the film as the younger brother?
I did.
Did you think he was kind of stiff?
No, I thought he was good.
Okay.
I'm glad he didn't show up as full-blown hippie caricature.
Yeah.
He could have shown up, with a joint, like, hey man.
Yeah.
But instead he shows up and he's clearly just somebody who's been away from the small town and has picked up some affectations and some mindsets of the real world outside of this town. So I liked that it was a kind of subtle progressive character from the 70s rather than full-blown Easy Rider.
And I like they could have played that up like he really just hates this family, he has nowhere to go, so he's just gonna but he gets involved pretty quickly, and he's out there working with them. He's not that kind of stereotypical, like I'm just gonna sit in my room.
Exactly.
Like,
it could have been so tiring if it was just him, the new world versus the old world with his family. That could have been just exhausting.
just
so
like
typical.
fist fight with dad, like over the new and the old. That could have been too much. So I'm glad they didn't go in that direction. And another thing, I thought the family unit, they looked like they could be related. Sometimes I don't know. You watch movies where, like, I thought that Lee, it was like his eyes or something. He looked like he could be related to Henry Fonda.
I agree.
Whereas some movies, you're like, there's no way those two are related.
No, I can totally see it. I completely agree. I think it was good casting overall.
Yeah. So my last question about the movie, I ask of each guest is, so if this movie were to be made today, someone took this novel and updated it in 2021, like they took the same story, the same characters, like how do you think it would be similar? How do you think it would be different in 2021, do you think?
Well, first of all, in 2021, I think it would be a mini series. I don't think it would be a movie. I think it would be 7 episodes on HBO.
Yep.
It'd be one of those where people will tell you, the first 4 episodes are bad, but then you got to get through it.
And then
get
through the first
5.
couple.
Oh man, yeah.
Episode 5, the whole episode, an hour, would just be on the disaster on the site.
Right, the brother drowning.
The yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know who I would cast in this. I'm trying to think of current modern day actors.
It'd be interesting. So I mean, do you set, if you were to make it in 2021, do you set it back in 1970, 1971, or do you make it I don't know. Does this job look the same in 2021? I'm not really sure.
I think you'd have to set it in the 70s because I think aspects of it are tied to the time period, the stodginess of the old world with Henry Fonda,
and the strike elements and all that.
The strike part, the way that the younger brother comes into the world, and he clearly has been, changed by the outside world. That would still happen now. If anybody went to college, you can make that work as a character choice. But I think it's so reliant on the changing world of the late 60s, early 70s that you would probably have to make it a period piece.
Yeah, that's a great idea to make it a limited series. And we've talked about a little bit on the podcast before. I don't think every story needs to be an 8-episode series, but I think this one, which is very much about the family dynamic, and I felt in 2 hours there were parts that felt like weren't explored enough. I feel like you could, if you got a really dynamic cast in 2021, 2022, and got a talented director who was there for like the whole thing, like could be really rich, could be really good. Like I would love to watch that.
Especially knowing it's based on a novel, and like you said, kind of watching the movie and seeing what was clearly shortened or cut or not expanded on, you would have time to do that in a miniseries.
Yeah, which is what it's always so good for. I mean, there are sometimes shows I'm like, okay, this is clearly like 4 hours worth of stuff, and they're filling it up to 8. It's like sometimes you kind of feel that. That's always hard when you're on. They always start at episode 1, usually just grabs you, and then like around episode 4 is when you're like, this is kind of stretching.
Right. And then they'll be like, because of the normal way that plots move, climaxes come about 3/4 of the way through the story. Usually the 5th or 6th episode, if you're doing like 8 episodes, it's it's great, and then there's like 2 episodes afterwards of nothing.
But I think this one would work in that way. I like that idea. I liked it. I'm trying to think of like a rating I would give it. Like I do the 4-star Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel. Okay, I've always done that since I was a kid. And it's kind of continued. Like I tried doing the 1 through 10 for a while, and I'm like, that doesn't feel right. Or
I love
A through
the
F.
1 through 10.
Oh, you do 1 through 10. Do you do point? Do you do point 2? Like you'll do
no, not that crazy. No,
you won't do like 7.3.
No, I'm decisive to a point. I like to, but I think 1 through 10 for me allows a fuller breadth of how I look at films.
This is a great example of a movie. It's right on the cusp there, because like with Siskel and Ebert, it was 2.5 stars was a thumbs down and 3 stars with a thumbs up. This one for me is right on the cusp of like 2.5 to 3, because that scene is so great. It feels weird to give the movie a 2.5, but at the same time, there's a lot I think in the movie that doesn't work that well. So I don't know. It's like right at the cusp there.
I agree. Because my brain is broken, I can't watch movies anymore without like thinking the whole time, like, what am I going to rate this?
What's the rating?
For the whole movie, I was a 5 until out of 10 until that scene happened, and then I changed it to a 6, which was my ultimate. If you look at my letterbox where I categorize everything, that's what I ended up giving.
You gave it a 6. Okay. Yeah. So I think if I had to, I think 3 is too kind. I just think enough of the movie, there's too much in it that doesn't work that well. But I think I would give it a 2.5. But I do think it's worth. I think it's worth a watch, especially if you're a fan of Paul Newman in any way, and this one has escaped you. I think it's worth a look. If you're a fan of Henry Fonda, and if you're an Oscar completist,
yes,
I think you at least. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't watch the whole thing, but you have to see that scene.
That scene is
you have
worth
to
it.
see that scene.
Yeah,
it's really. There are parts of the film that are slow, and you're like, why? What's happening here? Why do we care? But you get to that moment, and there's really nothing like it. I've looked at 35, 40 films for 71 for the podcast, and that's one of the top 5 scenes of any movie I've watched this whole year. Top 5 scenes of all of them. So
right, and like we said, it does stand out partly because it's so good compared to the rest of the film. Which I'm not sure if that's praise or not, but.
There's very few films that I've seen in my life where it for the most part is kind of mediocre, but it has one glorious scene. That's very rare. I feel like usually when a scene is that good, usually most everything else around it is pretty solid too.
Well, yeah, you would hope. That's
usually how it works.
Exactly.
Not in this case. But yeah, it's still worth a look, I would say. All right, that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's called the Divine Double Feature, where we pick a more modern film to pair with this. So imagine someone is just finishing this movie. What would you recommend something a little bit newer that they would put on right after?
Okay, so I'm a teacher's pet, and I picked 3 movies.
You picked 3
these
movies.
Are all modern movies, and they're all they're connected in tenuous ways. So just go with me here. So my first pick, the one that jumped to mind first and most obviously, I think, is Billy Elliot. Which is similarly about industrial blue-collar workers going through a strike. In that movie, they are strikers. As opposed to this movie, there's scab workers, which is a whole thing.
Yep.
And that's also a domestic drama, a domestic family drama about different generations and masculinity. So I think that was the most obvious film that jumped to mind for me. Another one, and I don't know.
Stephen Daldry, who wasn't he nominated for his first 3 films, all 3 of them, for director?
Yeah, Billy Elliot, The Hours, and The Reader.
And then his 4th film, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, got a picture nomination.
Got Best Picture.
He almost
did. Yeah,
he almost got there.
Almost. So that was a big. I go back and watch the nomination announcement of that year specifically because they hold off.
Oh, I'm not the only one who does that.
Oh no! There's dozens of us.
That music,
yeah,
that da 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 da. It's like that takes me back to childhood, maybe more than anything else. They're both.
But in 2011, the way they announced, I've watched them many times. Don't worry, I'm right there with you. But that year specifically, because they knew that Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close was going to be a shocker, so they saved it for last.
Yeah.
And then when it pops up on the screen, you hear the audience just go crazy, and I miss that about the way they do nominations.
It's always Sandra Bullock movies when they announce The Blind Side for Best Picture, a loud chorus of screams, and then it happened again with Extremely Loud. So, not the only Sandra fan out there.
No, I guess not. Yeah.
And I just, I did real quick. I just watched for the very first time. I'd never seen it before. The announcements for the 1991 film. So the 1992 Oscar ceremony for 91, Sounds of the Lambs. Have you seen that one of 91 where I think was it Kathleen Turner?
I think I have. Yeah.
And when she announces, Beauty and the Beast, that was the biggest
I have watched it because
scream
of that. Yeah.
I've ever heard in one of those. Like people went completely nuts when she said Beauty and the Beast. Because it was the first animated feature to get a Best Picture nomination. And that was really cool. I just watched that in the last 2-3 weeks, but that was cool too.
Yeah. Take me back. I was less than a year old, but sure.
You were less than a year old. You might have watched it, right? My first ceremony. My first Oscar ceremony I remember watching was the 1996. Oh no, it might have been 95, somewhere around there. But once you get sucked into those award shows, you're a fan for life.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. I'll be watching them till I die, for better or for worse.
Yeah. I mean, they're still good. I mean, the newest one, the newest ceremony, obviously because of the pandemic, had to look different and be different, but there was something missing. I don't know what it was.
I hated it.
Yeah, it was like, this isn't.
Boo.
And I was not a huge fan of the fall 2020 releases. Like, there were a couple that I really loved, but there were some I'm like, why is this even in the conversation? Like, that was kind of a rough season. So I'm crossing my fingers for a better season these coming few weeks here.
Well, just the lack of clips alone for the nominees did a lot to make it feel really elitist. And unfortunately,
the most anticlimactic ending, I think, of an Oscar show in history was that ending. Which I'm sure you've talked about ad nauseum.
Yes, I have. Maybe for longer than the actual ceremony.
That was more that was a bigger twist ending than the Moonlight La La Land. I was like, what? Okay.
It definitely made me angrier, I'll tell you that. Definitely shocked me more.
Not how you end the show.
You guys really flopped here. All right.
Well, we'll see what happens next. All right, so Billy Elliot, what are the other two?
This one is tenuous, but Manchester by the Sea, I think, is a really good examination of what the trappings of masculinity can do to a person. That movie's all about a man who feels the necessity of having to suppress his emotions because of societal expectations for men. I think this is a similar thing that Sometimes a Great Notion explores. It's also just a good movie. You should just watch it.
Oh yeah. It's harrowing movie. I love that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Another movie with like a shocking disaster that happens in it that changes the course of the characters' lives. It's really upsetting, but really good movie.
Yeah.
And my last recommendation, this isn't gonna make much sense, but it's
Scooby-Doo.
2010 2 Monsters Unleashed. Yeah. No, not that one. It's the 2010 action movie Unstoppable, which is about a train that is just go with me here. So that's it's a great movie. Oh, it's so good. It's a movie about people, much like this movie, who don't do their jobs properly, and an accident occurs. In this movie, a tree falls on some people and some arms fall off. In Unstoppable, a train plows through Pennsylvania. Maybe that's not the most obvious connection, but the movie Unstoppable is really good. So I just wanted to give it a shout out.
Think, it can be something as simple as, sometimes a Great Notion is fairly slow. Sometimes I'm thinking about okay, what would the viewer want to have if they put on something else? Like, sometimes I've just recommended like a comedy just because I feel like not this movie, but like other episodes, I'm like, this movie is so depressing. Like, I feel like the viewer would need a comedy next. I think Unstoppable would be a good one, like to just kind of pick up the pace a little bit.
Oh, because she's fast. She's going.
Was that the last film that Tony Scott directed?
I think it was.
I think it was the last one.
Song.
Yeah. Worked with Denzel all the time. I love the work they did together, he and Denzel Washington. Lots of great stuff. Yeah, those are really great choices. Rocks. So if you start the movie early enough in the day, you can just watch all 4 of those in one sitting.
That would be a strange quadruple feature. Not sure what you get out of that.
Honey, why are you watching these specific? Oh, it was a recommendation on Film at 50. I just listened to the new
This really smart, handsome guy recommended it.
That's right.
His name is Cody.
And he's at Next Best Picture. And he recommended all 3 of these to watch after. So I'm doing it. So I'll make dinner later. I'm good.
Yeah, that's awesome. My power.
Cool. So my choice was, so I kind of thought about the location. I think like the place, the setting is such a character in the movie. I went with Leave No Trace from 2018. Did you see that film?
Okay, yeah.
By Deborah Granick and Ben Foster.
Granick,
yeah. Ben Foster is like living in the Oregon, kind of like the woods of Oregon, and
they're off the grid.
The grid, and it's a it's a more like kind of pared down film than Sometimes a Great Notion, which is more of a studio film. It's such a beautiful look at this father and daughter, and a lot about family dynamics, and it's all in Oregon and their relationship. And there's so much great location photography and sometimes a great notion. I was kind of thinking about what are some films I love more recent years that are set in Oregon, and that was the one that immediately popped in my head.
That movie's fantastic.
Really,
it's such a wonderful,
really great,
like tender movie. If this movie is about a troublesome, toxic family relationship, that movie is about the opposite. It's a lovely father-daughter
dynamic between the father and daughter. And just, I remember it kind of surprised me kind of where it went in the story, and it was just really well done. It's not a movie I feel like is being talked a lot these days, but I really enjoyed it, so I wanted to give a shout out to that one. I think it did well at the Indie Spirit Awards. I think it got nominated there.
Yeah, and it was one of those that people were like, maybe it'll get a surprise best director,
maybe a surprise
nomination.
And I don't think it didn't get screenplay, right? It didn't get anything.
It got 0 because her last movie, Winter's Bone, was an Oscar success.
Right.
It got best picture, best screenplay, best actress.
Yeah, I feel like those movies, those movies happen every year. There's always a couple that do really well at the Indie Spirit Awards, or at least nominations, and then they just don't transcend anywhere else. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which I thought was an extraordinary film, and I was like, how is this not going anywhere beyond the Indie Spirit Awards? That was kind of perplexing to me, because I thought that was one of the 5 best films of 2020, and I was surprised that it didn't at least get into maybe an acting category or something.
Yeah.
So it happens. All right, so that takes us to our final segment, Beyond the Flick. That's where we talk about an actor, director, or a genre affiliated with the movie, dig a little deeper. I thought we'd talk about actor and director today with Paul Newman, who I don't think we've talked about Paul Newman on the podcast yet. Obviously a big one.
All right.
So yeah, so just first off, what role has Paul Newman films played in your life? Is he an actor that you have, you consider one of our finest? Have you really enjoyed his films? Kind of what role has his work played in your life?
Yeah, I think he's one of those examples of classic Hollywood leading man movie star who also could really, really act. You don't always see those two things paired together. And when they do, it's electrifying because they have the best of both worlds. They can command an audience and be a popular star, but they have the abilities to captivate you on an artistic level. So I, just by kind of going through the annals of film history and watching the most important movies, you get a lot of Paul Newman performances just kind of by accident
throughout the decades.
He's in so many good movies.
From the 1950s to the 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. I like the guy.
Yeah, I've always really admired him. I mean, he is just one of the most beautiful actors in movies.
Well, that too.
Watching him in Sometimes a Great Notion, I'm just like, Jesus. I mean, I almost wonder if it hurt him a little bit. And I think that was Robert Redford too, and some of these guys that are just so insanely gorgeous. It might have been hard for them to maybe take on some kind of roles that other actors, their contemporaries might have been able to do, especially into the 70s, when you get a Robert De Niro and an Al Pacino and a Dustin Hoffman, guys who aren't your typical leading man look. Someone like Paul Newman is just so gorgeous. It's sometimes hard for him to step out of the box and do something different.
Right. And I mean, he, like a lot of actors of that, type, younger, handsome men, that takes a while for them to, specifically, we're talking the Academy, recognition. It takes them getting a little older. And Paul Newman wouldn't win his Oscar till 86, and you think of people like
the one he didn't
Leonardo
go to,
DiCaprio, people like that. Exactly. So
that story, right? Do you know that story?
I actually don't.
He I think he went to most of them that he was nominated, and then he got nominated for The Color of Money, 86, and he said, I'm gonna sit this one out, maybe I'll win. And then he won.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Have you seen The Color of Money? It's okay.
I haven't. It's one of the few best actor winners I haven't seen.
He's solid in it. It's a 25-year sequel to The Hustler, which makes it kind of interesting. He's playing the same character, so that's kind of rare. 25 years later, your name's not Jamie Lee Curtis. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, all I really know about it is, obviously, it's one of Martin Scorsese's less obvious films. People, I always forget that he directed that movie.
I mean, I've read a couple books on Scorsese's career, and I think that was more than maybe any other movie he ever directed. That was kind of a director for hire situation. I don't think he was actively pursuing Color of Money, because in the mid 80s, his career was kind of on the down. Raging Bull, as much as we love it, was not a big box office hit by any means. And then King of Comedy was a big flop. After Hours was kind of a small little movie. I think like he took on Color of Money just to like get something of like something bigger, like something that would actually get his name back on the map, because he wanted to make the Last Temptation of Christ. So yeah, it's not in the same category of like most of his other great works, but it's a solid Paul Newman performance. I'm glad he won for something.
And all I really know about it is that it's like it's considered one of those Oscar wins that it's kind of just okay, but you can tell they just want to give this person an Academy Award no matter what it took.
Yeah, if he had not won for Color of Money, I always wonder, like, could he have had more of a chance in '94 for Nobody's Fool, the year that Tom Hanks won for Forrest Gump, which was kind of like that was going to happen pretty much regardless. But Tom Hanks had won the year before for Philadelphia. If Paul Newman had not won for Color of Money, I always wonder, and that's the whole nother conversation.
I always love playing that game. Yeah. The domino effect
from like the late 2000s, like if Meryl Streep had won for Doubt,
right,
what would have happened with Viola Davis? And then it's like this like domino effect thing. It's so weird to think like one win can like make the difference. I mean, it really
I think about it all the time. Don't worry.
But so he didn't win for The Hustler or for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof or Butch Cassidy or The Sting, and like he won for The Color of Money. Okay. So what are your top 3 or 4? Like, what are your favorites? Like, what are the films that he's in that you think are the best?
Yeah. So I think this is so obvious, but I think probably both the best movie he was ever in and also maybe his best performance is Cool Hand Luke. Okay. I think that's I'm not breaking any boundaries by saying that. That's, it's a pretty standard answer, but it's kind of undeniable. You watch that movie and it's just a great character blockbuster.
It came out at the right time. It's like it's such when you think of that movie, almost more so than almost anything else he did, you think Paul Newman. Like that's like your go-to.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I love that movie. I also I think maybe his what I would give him the Oscar for is The Verdict, his movie. I think it was 1982.
Sidney Lumet.
Sidney Lumet, who I love. Sidney Lumet. It's a good movie. It's nothing astounding, but I think he's just phenomenal in it. I think it's everything you want to see a late career actor doing. He's playing kind of a like down on his luck lawyer who gets one case that suddenly he needs to like focus his energy on to
alcoholic, right?
Alcoholic, spends his time in a bar. It's really just fantastic work, and it's that kind of effortless, was a movie star in his heyday and still has the ability to like continue being an actor past his what society would deem as like typical prime of attractiveness or whatever. And then my last pick is not a movie he's in, but we've mentioned a few times. It's his directorial debut, Rachel.
Okay, yeah, I saw it too. I wasn't doing the podcast yet, but in 2018, I looked back at some 68 releases, and I had never seen that before, and it's really, really stellar. Yeah, what do we like about it?
I remember just really liking it. It's been a while since I saw it, but I think it's a really assured directorial debut. It's a very mature movie. It deals with a lot of adult themes, especially that early in the post Hays Code era is really kind of shocking to see, but in a good way. And we were talking about, is it full of directorial flourishes? Not really. I think Rachel is. I remember that having a very strong directorial hand, but in a way that didn't distract from the movie.
Yeah, it was kind of
also
a smaller
the lead actress
film,
in
right?
it is Joanne Woodward, his wife. Yeah. It was, but like I said, it got nominated for Best Picture, so it clearly was liked. And he actually won the Golden Globe for Best Director.
Oh, okay.
But wasn't even nominated for the Oscar. So it was one of those weird things that happens now and then.
Was Woodward nominated for Best Actress?
He was, and I would personally would have voted for the year, I think. Yeah. Although no, it's the Streisand year. You got to give it to Barbara. Never mind.
You'd give it to Barbara for Funny Girl.
Yeah, I can't go against that. I'll be excommunicated. Yeah, it's Joanne Woodward is really great, and especially being directed by her husband is it's a fun little piece of film history right there.
Yeah, she won for, was it called The Three Faces of Eve from like the late 50s?
Three Faces of Eve, which is a very showy performance. She's playing multiple personalities. She gets to do, play like a character who's good, a character who's really bad. And it's a fun performance. It's a very showy performance. And I think it's a good win. I'm not against it. It's just a very obvious win.
It's a good thing that Rachel turned out so well, because that can be kind of awkward, right? The husband directing the wife in the movie. I mean, you could get a swept away, right?
You could get that. You could get what's that movie that Angelina did with Brad Pitt? Right
before they got divorced? By the sea,
in the sea,
I think it's called By the Sea.
By the Sea.
That was weird. That was a weird movie. I watched it. I'm like, I didn't hate it, but I'm just like, this is strange.
I didn't see that movie. I skipped that one.
Yeah. So that's a great choice. I would definitely put that in the runners up if I was thinking about films he directed. There's no big, like, I was looking at his films. There's a lot of films he's in the 70s that I'm like barely even aware of. So we'll get to more of his work later. But I mean, the big ones like Butch Cassidy, The Sting, Absence of Malice with Sally Fields, a really good film right before The Verdict, and Nobody's Fool. And I just love his performance in Road to Perdition. Last great film role from 2002.
His last nomination too.
Last nomination. Like, he is great in that. Like, his final scene right before he's killed at the end, like that. I'll never forget that. He's really great in that. My favorites would be Cool Hand Luke, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Have you seen Cat on a Hot Tin Roof?
Like, I have.
So like it's it's kind of melodramatic, late 50s, very beautiful kind of Technicolor cinematography. But like his scenes with like the father, and then with Elizabeth Taylor, it's just a really rich film. Tennessee Williams, writing I think he wrote the screenplay too, based on his play.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And it's just a great movie. And it's like, I think that was his breakthrough, right? 58. So I think that came out 58.
Sounds about right. I'm not as familiar with.
I think I looked up his filmography yesterday briefly, and I think his first film role was like 55, 56. But then Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was kind of his major film breakthrough. But if I had to pick my favorite, kind of like how you said with Cool Hand Luke, like when I think of Paul Newman, I watched it again a few years ago. I just think it's so great. And I think The Hustler from 61 is just such a fantastic movie. Black and white, looks gorgeous. He plays a really riveting character in that. And Piper Laurie, who I love, is also great in it. It's kind of like the woman he falls for, and their dynamic's really interesting. And I mean, I like Color of Money, the 25 years later sequel, but I think The Hustler is the one to see. I just think he is great in that. I forgot to look to see if he got nominated for The Hustler.
He was, yeah.
Okay, he did. Okay.
Yeah,
but he's great in that. And I think if I had to take one Paul Newman movie to a desert island, I think it'd be The Hustler. I just love him in that. It's a great movie.
I've actually never seen it, so
you've never seen it?
Yeah,
okay,
no,
so
I've never seen that
one.
Sequel.
Put that one on the list. The Hustler, like I would suggest anybody who's a fan of Paul Newman, if you have not seen The Hustler, I would definitely take a look at that one. It's really great. All right, Cody, that takes us to the end here. Thanks so much for being on Film at 50 today. Do you have anything you'd like to promote or tell our listeners where they can find you online?
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great. I'm glad I had a reason to finally watch this movie. I don't think I probably would have checked it out otherwise, but I'm glad I did. Even talking about it or not, I'm glad I got to watch it. I don't have much to promote besides check out my writing and podcasting, which I always link to on my Twitter, which is Cody Monster 91. That's also the name of my Letterboxd and my Instagram if you feel like following my Instagram. I don't know, but yeah, Twitter and Letterboxd are where you're going to get most of my film stuff at Cody Monster 91.
Okay, cool. And I'd love to have you on the podcast again. Really great conversation we had. I love that you love horror films. It's my favorite. It's my favorite genre. So a lot of cool horror films coming up here in 72. So I'd love to have you back at some time to talk about that genre. It'd be a lot of fun. All right. Thanks again for being here, Cody. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.